I think I've muted the live stream for me. And should I mute me now on Zoom too? No, because then I can't hear you. Oi.
Well, hello, welcome, hopefully welcome back. I'm very pleased on behalf of the Buddhist Association of the United States, the Chuanyan Monastery in Carmel, New York, and the Wuju Memorial Library to bring you our latest installment of Pali Summer Intensive. We're back here today. This is our fourth session. Time flies. We've covered so much already in Pali Primer, and I would like to make a very special mention. First of all, I would like to mention my friend Diane, who has kindly agreed to have a look at whoever might be on YouTube, and if there are people on YouTube with questions, she can hopefully relay those questions to me here in the Zoom room. So if you are in the Zoom room, you can use that live chat feature to ask a grammatical question. And I have another very special thing to announce, which is that I have been made aware of the fact that today, or perhaps tomorrow, July 16th is the birthday of Lily da Silva. And so I'm very pleased to have been made aware of that. So for some people, it is July 16th. For me, it's July 15th. It's a little odd to think that it's a different day for some people. But anyway, I would just like to say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu to Lily da Silva, who has created a tremendous resource for all budding Pali students to join into a wonderful course of learning in a very gentle way. And I think that's what we're trying to do here, especially for people who have not had a Sanskrit background prior to learning Pali. There's sort of a steep learning curve, particularly in relation to the cases. And speaking of cases, we've covered 6 out of 8 so far, and we'll finish the other 2 today. And let me share my screen. I found this file here, which has a review. I hope you can all see it. Or it's sort of what's called a paradigm so far of the masculine nouns ending in short A. And our model word is nara. And we can see here all the 8 cases in singular and plural. And with all the variants, I haven't had the courage to add it all up, but I know there are lots of options here to learn about. And we notice, of course, that instrumental and ablative share the plural suffix, and dative and genitive share the plural suffix, a plural suffix as well. And another thing which causes consternation to various students is that sometimes case endings are across cases. And so, for instance, we're going to learn today that the locative singular ending is with an E, nore, but wait, it's also the accusative plural ending. How will I ever figure it out? Well, the answer is through context and through experience, and almost always it's not too hard to discern which case is being intended and used. And so I think what I'd like to do is very quickly ask if there were any questions in the exercises through lessons 1 through 6. There might be, I'm not sure, because I know from experience that sometimes even when you're presented with the answers or the translation, it's not immediately apparent why that is the translation. Even when I have the Pali and I have the English, sometimes it's not clear to me why that X equals Y. And so if there are any vexing questions with the prior chapters, if you were doing your work and you couldn't quite understand why one was the other, you can raise your blue hand, and then I will take that question. And I also would like to remind people that if your question has been answered, please lower your hand, and so then I can understand who has spoken and who hasn't. But so far I'm not seeing any. Oh, I am seeing a couple. And so again, I'm going to ask, if you do have a question, kindly refer quickly to the chapter number, which is called the lesson number, and the example number. So what I need, if you ask a question, is the lesson number, which is the chapter number, and the example number as well. So I'll start here with Juan, if you can unmute, hopefully. And then if you have a question.
Yes, I do. I have a question of the exercise. I'm not sure if it's too early for me to ask this question. In exercise 9.
Which chapter?
9.
Chapter 9. I don't think we've got to chapter 9, have we?
Oh, okay. Okay, I can ask later.
Maybe ask when we get to chapter 9. Okay.
Thank you. How can I put down?
You press the button, hopefully, that says lower hand. Okay.
Lower hand. Is it okay?
Okay. I have Emilia. You have a question?
Hi, Stephen. Yes, I do have the question. It's kind of confused me and lost me. Is it in the exercise 6 and the number 4?
Wait, lesson number 6, exercise 4?
Yes.
Okay, hang on. Let me pull up my copy of Pali Primer. Okay. Lesson number 6, exercise 4. Vanijanang asa kasa kasa gamang davanti. Is that the one?
Yeah. Is that the one? So I'm kind of confusing. Sin is a Vanijaman, Asa is a genitive case. And then Kasa Gaman is a genitive case as well.
Okay, so what case is asa?
Asa is a horse.
Yes, but what case is it in?
It is in the Asa is a genitive.
No, it is the nominative plural, and it's preceded by a genitive. And so very often the Pali syntax works where the genitive will immediately come before the noun it's describing. And so the first word, 2 words taken together, are merchants' horses, or horses of the merchants. So we have a genitive plural, and then we have a nominative plural.
Oh, okay.
You see that?
So the answer will be a merchant's horse ran to the village of farmer?
Yes, that's right. Merchants' horses run to the farmer's village or to the village of the farmers. That is correct. Okay, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Father.
Okay, And now we have one more. Huang, if you can unmute. And which question is yours?
Yeah, lesson 6, number 7.
Okay. Number 7. Vanija game manusanang pitakehi mache aharanti. Right?
Yeah, right.
That's a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
How did you translate it?
I just see the farmers bring fish, but after that, it's not clear for me. I don't know how to translate that.
Okay, so the subject is
Vanija.
merchants, nominative plural, right?
Yeah.
And then we
Right.
have the verb aharanti, that's also
Yes.
plural. They bring, and they're bringing, the direct object is fish
Yeah.
in the accusative plural. And then we have manusanang pitakehi. So we recognize pitakehi as an instrumental plural with by baskets or with baskets, and then of
Game.
the people.
Game, how do you translate that?
Yeah. So this is the big question. Is it in the village? Because that would be the obvious answer, but we haven't had the locative yet, so to speak, in this question. So I would have to take it again as to the village, as to villages. I'm not sure. It's a very strange one.
Yeah.
So I would say to the villages of people. So I would translate this sentence as merchants bring fish by baskets to people's villages. And I would take game as the direct object along with mache, because remember, verbs of motion can take the accusative as the direct object of the verb aharanti. Okay? But it definitely is not a great sentence, and I wouldn't stress too much about it, but I think that would be the answer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, unless Diane has reported anything from YouTube, then we can move on to our new 2 cases.
There are a lot of questions, Stephen.
There are a lot of questions about...
There are a lot of questions.
Well, why don't you ask me one quickly, or 2?
Well, one question, I'm not sure I even understand it. The person says, when translating, I often add the indirect objects to the wrong person. Is there a way to tell who they belong to?
Well, the indirect object is generally expressed in Pali using the dative case. But I'm not sure how to answer that question without a specific example. Maybe let's do, does someone have a specific question relating to a specific exercise, I mean?
Oh, if you're asking me that, yes, there are quite a few. So I'm wondering why they aren't in Zoom. Lesson 5.
Okay.
It says 5, number 3. Could you explain?
Okay,
So,
I hope this is exercise or lesson 5, number 3. Okay, I hope I found the right one. Let's make sure I have my notes. Okay, so assuming I have the question correct, Miga pasanamha pabatang davanti. So deer run, right? That's a nominative plural with a long A. And then we go to the verb davanti, that's the plural, third person plural. They are running, or they run. And then it's a verb of motion. And so that takes, running takes accusative, singular, pabatang, that's to the mountain. And then we have our ablative, pasanamha, from the rocks, or deer run from the rocks to the mountain. And so the cases in this sentence are nominative plural, ablative singular, accusative singular, and third person plural verb. Any other questions quickly?
Well, the person who asked about the indirect objects has specified exercise 6, number 6.
Okay, let's try that. Lesson 6, number 6. Okay, here we go. Matulasa that's 5. Number 6. Amacho bupalasa kagena sapang paharati. Okay, so amacho is a minister, nominative singular. Then we go to the verb. Paharati is to strike or to hit. Then we have the direct object of that hitting, which is what's being hit is a sapa, which is a serpent. That's the accusative singular. And then we continuing to work backwards. We have our instrumental, kagena, with a sword. And then the kaga is being described by a genitive, bupalasa, of the king. So putting that together, the minister hits a snake with the king's sword, or the sword of the king. And so this sentence has no dative. It has...
Well, excuse me, Stephen, they say, I misspoke in my original question. My problem is with genitives,
Yes.
not indirect objects.
Okay, so I think a helpful thing to say here, and then we'll leave it, is that often, but not always, but often, a genitive will immediately precede, come before, the word it's going with. They're sort of running together. So in this sentence, we have bupalasa kagena, the king's sword, but sword here is in instrumental. So with the king's sword, or by the king's sword. So I hope that can be helpful. So genitives often immediately precede what they are describing, which is very much how it is in English, right? Diane's question is a good one. So here, Diane's, what we might say, is a genitive, and it's going with the question. So the subject of that sentence is a question, and it's being described by Diane's right before it. So just like in English. Okay, maybe we'll leave it there because we have so much to cover and so little time. And so I wanted to take our 2 new cases, and I thought I would give you a few real life, so to speak, examples because I think they're fun to look at, even though I understand that they don't always include words you know. But I think it's kind of good for various reasons. One is, it's just good to get used to looking at Pali and not freak out and think, I have no idea what this means. And second of all, it's nice to see things from the canon. So I think we're up to the locative case. And the locative case is, as you might have guessed, the case which shows location, where. It could be in, on, at, and it also can have the sense of about. So let's look at a few sentences that I've sort of pulled out of. Actually, I have been using some grammar books to help me with these examples. I'm not just entirely mining through the entire Pali Canon. So here, our first sentence is Tathagato loke upajati. So we recognize and hopefully understand this first word as a nominative singular, the Tathagata. Interestingly, the word Tathagata is often left untranslated. We could translate it in some way, but it seems to be a word which is almost intentionally ambiguous. It could mean many different things. And it's hard to say which one is the, quote, right one. I think, in fact, I'm thinking that Buddhaghosa in Visuddhimagga gives something like 9 different possible explanations for what the word Tathagata might mean. So I think for here, we'll just leave it as a word that refers to the Buddha, and it's also the word the Buddha often describes himself as, or refers to himself as. He will say, the Tathagata so-and-so, and he's talking about himself. He doesn't really say I, the Tathagata. And then we have our verb, which means to arise or appear, upajjati. And then we have our locative, in the world. So loka means world, and it's in the locative singular. So the Tathagata arises in the world, and that's a use of locative. Here's a second one. Here's another word for the Buddha, which we've had as well, the Bhagava. Well, maybe we've had it because of, I think you've all seen it before. This would be the nominative singular. It's not in the short A class, so don't be confused by the long A. It's short. It's a form of the word bhagavant, and the vant suffix often has the sense of having or possessing, and the word bhaga means something like good fortune. And so that's why this word is often translated as the Blessed One. The Blessed One, and we have the Blessed One, panyate asane nisidi. So this is a form of the word nisidati, to sit. And here's the word which I'm hoping you would recognize. It's the word asana, which means a seat. It's also the word you might have heard from a yoga class when you do triangle pose. That's called an asana too, a posture. But in Pali, it generally means a seat, a place upon one sits. And it's in the locative singular, and it's being described with an adjective. And just so you know, adjectives must match the word they are modifying with the case. And so it's being described as panyate, which is usually translated as prepared or designated. It's actually related to this very common word, which we should all know, pajanati, which means to know. And so the sense here is sort of like the recognized seat, the seat specifically what for him. So Bhagava panyate asane nisidi, the Blessed One sat on the designated seat. And here we have kosalesu charikam charity. So charity, I think, is a verb which is coming up, to go about, to walk about. Charity. Charikam is like a walking tour, perhaps, and then this is a locative. I hope you can recognize the ending. Amongst the Kosalans. So Kosala was a kingdom in ancient India where the Buddha spent a lot of time. And so here the Buddha, it's sort of, the subject of the sentence is not stated. It's sort of built into the verb, he or she perhaps. But here probably it's the Buddha. So he walks amongst the Kosalas. Maybe we'll skip quickly because we don't have much time. Here's another locative. Devesu tavating sesu patur ahosi. So he appeared, Devesu tavating sesu, amongst the devas of the Tavatingsa heaven. The Tavatingsa heaven, sometimes translated as the heaven of the 33, a sort of celestial realm in Buddhism, the Tavatingsa heaven. And I just want you to get used to seeing this esu suffix as just as indriyesu, gutta dvaro. Dvaro means door. It's one of our vocabulary words coming up. Guarded. So with a guarded door in regard to the indriyas, the faculties. So indriyesu. And here's a word, a phrase which you might recognize because I think it's part of the precepts. Kamesu michachara. So micha is the opposite of samma. So for instance, we have samma sati would be right mindfulness. But of course, if there's right mindfulness, there's wrong mindfulness. And wrong is miccha. And chara has the sense of conduct. So this would mean wrong conduct. And here's that sense of locative I mentioned a moment ago, in regard to kama, sensual pleasure, sometimes translated as sexual conduct, sexual misconduct. So this is the precept about sexual or sensual misconduct. Notice the word kama, a very important word in Pali, should not be confused with this word, kamma, which has two M's and short A's. And so kama, see, they might seem like pretty much the same, except they have rather different meanings. Kama is something like sensual pleasure or sensuality, and kamma is action, which is the word in Sanskrit karma. Okay? So that is a quick sort of Pali canon, so to speak, introduction to the world of locative. And now I think we can go to our exercises in Pali Primer. Is this locative? Yes. And
can I interrupt you with one general question?
Sure, please go ahead.
Asked by two people.
Yeah.
Is there a rule of how to order the terms if there are all the cases, nominative, accusative, instrumental, and dative?
I would say not necessarily. Not that there's no hard and fast rule. I've been trying to give some of them, but there's no hard and fast rule. No.
Well,
and in fact,
instance,
yeah.
In lesson or exercise 3, number 10, it's either the kings together with the wise men see the monks, or the kings see the monks together with the, I mean, how do
Okay, let's take a quick look. Yeah, again, as I've said, we shouldn't stress too much about the fine points of Pali Primer. We don't want to get too involved in the hermeneutics of Pali Primer. It's just a quick way to help us get used to case endings. So exercise 3 or lesson 3?
Lesson 3.
Yeah.
Number 10.
Number 10. Bhupala panditehi saha samane pasanti. So here we have this auxiliary word saha. We know that is used with the instrumental of accompaniment. And so we know that panditehi must therefore be instrumental because it's going with saha. They go together. They're a block, a group. So here, Bhupala is our nominative plural. Kings, pasanti, they see. Samane, samanas, together with wise men. Okay, I hope that answers the question, and it's an instrumental plural. I wanted to mention, by the way, I almost forgot that the word pandita, the Pali word, has, of course, a very clear analog in English, which is pundit. But at least as far as I know, in English, that word has often a negative connotation, sort of like a self-proclaimed expert that we might see on the news that we like to dislike, a pundit. That is not the case in Pali. In Pali, the word pundit is a truly wise person. It's not a sort of sarcastic term. That's just a fine point, but for English people, could be a little tricky. Okay, now, I hope, if I can find it, we can find locative and go to some examples. And let me pull up my notes, because I've had to write it out too to make sure I get it right. Okay, so I'd like to go through it, just a few of them so we can practice. Maybe I'll try the first one, and then we'll take some odd-numbered exercises because, we're in the odd numbered lesson. So here, Brahmano Sahaya Kena Sading Ratanghi Nisidati. So here, again, there's no question what case Sahaya Kena is in, because it's going right next to Sading. Those words have to go together. If there's a Sading or Saha, it has to lie next to, and almost, I think, always follow the instrumental word. And so we have the Brahmin sits Ratanghi in the carriage Sahayakena Sading with a friend. Okay, so that's we have again nominative singular, instrumental singular, locative singular, and our verb. If anyone would like to raise their hands to have a chance to read and translate, this is the moment for you. Okay, so I see we have Fiatra. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Fine, yeah.
Can you hear me? Can I hear you?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Which
Good.
exercise?
Yes. Would you mind doing for us number 3, which would be to read it first in Pali and then give us a translation?
Okay. So, Varnijo kasakasa nivase batang pachati.
Pachati.
Pachati. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the subject Varnijo is the merchant. Okay. So and then he's cooking, and he's cooking rice, and he's cooking rice in the house of the farmer.
Very good. Right. So nivase is our locative, and it's the genitive is lying right behind it, as I've said, of the farmer. You have it exactly right, I think. Thank you. Okay. I think we have Hitet Min Luin.
Yes,
Yes, would you be kind enough to do number 5?
sure, thank you. Sukatasa Savaka Viharasme Vasanti. Sukatasa, the Buddha's Savaka, disciples, plural. So the disciples of the Buddha, Vasanti, they dwell, Viharasme, at the monastery.
Yes, or in the monastery. Either one is fine. That's not a correction. That's just an option. And you have it exactly right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So notice again, this is a genitive immediately preceding the nominative. Sugata is another word that refers to the Buddha, sometimes translated as the well-gone one. So, okay, now we'll try Irene for number 7.
Number 7.
Yes, please.
Priyasa aloko samudamhi patati.
Mm-hmm.
The light from the sun falls on the sea.
Yes, right. So what case, just to check, is Suryasa?
Ablative.
No, it is not. It is a genitive.
Genitive?
I think of the sun, the light, the sun's light, or the light of the sun.
Can't it be from? The light from the sun?
But that's not a. But asa is not. Asa is not really an ablative ending. So I don't think so. No.
Oh,
Okay. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The light.
Okay, and let's try the next page. Maybe I'll skip a bit just to keep it mixed up a bit. So maybe we can have Jim do for us, if you wouldn't mind doing, say, 13.
Sure. Manusa Loki Jivanti Deva Sage Vasanti.
Yeah. Manusa loke jivanti, deva sagge vasanti.
So Manusa humans, Jivante live in the world.
Mhm.
Gods live in heaven.
Yes, right, right. So no problem with those locatives. Very good, thank you. And is there Shyler?
Hi, Skylar. Yeah.
Skylar, I apologize. I'm not good with pronouncing names, but I can do a little better with Pali. Would you mind doing for us 15?
15.
No, actually, 15 I think is a problem. So
It is. Yeah.
I want to maybe skip 15. It's a problematic sentence that is not worth stressing about. Would you mind doing maybe 17? That would be easier.
So tapasa pabatamhi viharanti.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the hermits dwell on the mountain.
Good. It's too short though. Do quickly for us in 19.
So kaka rukehi upatanti. So the crows fly through the trees.
Yeah, I would take that as an ablative plural, as in so through the trees or from the trees maybe. It's hard to say exactly, but something like that. Yes. Okay, thank you. And maybe we'll take one more. I think we have Johan, if you're there. If you
I'm here.
Good. Can you do for us 21?
21. Assa puriso kaggena navikassa tutam haranti. Assa puriso, the unvirtuous man, the messenger of the sailor with a sword.
Yes, right. So what did you call it? The unvirtuous man,
Yeah.
right? That is
Virtuous man.
And strikes paharati, the messenger, with the sword of the sailor. It seems like an odd reversal here, but these words are definitely going together as you've said. Good. And we could take one more. Sin we, if you're there and can unmute. Sin we, you have your hand raised. If not, then maybe we'll go to Catherine.
Okay.
Catherine, can you do for us
Yes.
23?
23. Okay. Manusa Suriyasa Alokana Lokam Pasanti. Human being or men see the world with the light of the sun, with the sun's light. Manusa is nominative plural, Suriyasa genitive singular, Alokana is instrumentive singular, Lokam is accusative singular, Pasanti is third person plural.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you for your hard work. I appreciate that. Okay, and maybe I'll just ask Diane quickly if there are any specific questions being raised on this chapter from the live stream that people were particularly vexed about that we haven't covered.
No.
No. Well, I'm so glad to hear it. Perfect. That I take that to mean that everyone understands. And then we can go on, and we can go on to the vocative case. And the vocative case, as I said in our last session, is a rather simple case to understand. It is the case to invoke a person's name, or perhaps an object, but almost very often it's a person. So if I said, there are more things, Horatio, in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in your philosophy. Well, when Hamlet says, there are more things, Horatio, he's in a sense using the vocative case. Or if I said, what you really need to do, Diane, is, of course, I would not hopefully be so direct, but that is also another way of, another use of vocative. And generally, in Pali, vocative never starts a sentence. It's found in the sentence. And so when the Buddha is referring to his monks, as I said last time, he's constantly saying, "O monks." He doesn't start a sentence with "O monks." It's found within the sentence. So he'll say things like, there are these 3 things, O monks, that you should know. So it's not just like people, it's a little more, I'm not sure if it's a deliberately polite turn of phrase, but that is how we find it in a syntactic sense. So the vocative is generally found within a sentence. It doesn't begin a sentence, which is different perhaps than English. And now we have, as I tried to show you in sort of our lead-up time, our full declension. And another thing I forgot to tell you about, which is very important, I apologize, is that she sort of has snuck in here a whole nother declension, a whole nother set of nouns, which is no big deal for us because it is very much the same as the short A masculine nouns, but this is the short A neuter nouns. Now keep in mind that gender in grammar here is not really a sexual gender. It's a grammatical marker. And so when we see the word pala, we don't have to think, well, a pala therefore is not a masculine object. It's a neuter object. I wouldn't think that way. It's just designated for some reason as neuter. And so the crucial thing to know about neuter nouns is that they differ in the nominative and the accusative. The rest is basically the same, except perhaps vocative plural, which we almost never need to be concerned with. But what does need to concern us, and what can trick or trip up new Pali students, as it has often done to me, is to confuse the nominative singular of a neuter noun with the accusative of a masculine short A noun. So let's look here. So we're given the word pala. Notice here we start this word with an aspirated P. So it's not pahala, it's pala, with a sort of puff of air. And the nominative singular ending for a neuter noun is the ung ending. And so it's palang. Now here is the trap. You might not know, or you might forget, that pala is a neuter noun, and you see it in a sentence, and you think, oh, I see the ung ending, it's accusative. But no, it could be the nominative, but the accusative is also palang. So we have to be very much on our toes here, but it's good to know, or keep track in our minds, which nouns are neuter, because then we won't make the mistake of thinking that it must be accusative. It could be nominative singular. Another good thing to know is that the palani or the ani suffix is by far the most common. And so the long A one is much less. I would not even worry about it. Just try to get it in your minds that the ani suffix is the neuter marker. When we see ani, we think neuter. But the rest of the cases decline identically, and that's why they're not even given here. It's not even worth thinking about. The thing to know are the nominative and the accusative, singular and plural. And again, ani is always the marker of neuter. Okay, so maybe we can try a few sentences. So we're now we are now in lesson 8, and we're going to try a few of these. And so I'll do maybe the first one, which is a simple one. Upasako pupanhi aharati. And so here we have a male lay follower, upasaka, in the nominative, brings pupani. And this is flowers in the plural accusative neuter gender. So this word is, if we want to talk about case, number, and gender, we have accusative, plural, neuter. Upasako pupani aharati. Okay, then let's see if we have some volunteers to do a few more. Huilin from Kuala Lumpur.
Yes.
Can you do for us number 2?
Sure. Arane, Miga, Vasanti, Rukesu, Makata, Charanti.
Okay, just one small correction.
Sure.
The first word has those wiggly lines over the N, and so it's aranye.
Arane. Nice. Arane. Did I get it right?
That's much better, yes. Thank you.
All right. I translated it as deer, or deer as in plural, but still deer.
Yes.
Live forests. Monkeys walk or move on the trees.
Yeah.
For me, arane is neutral, locative. Miga is masculine, subject, nominative, plural. Vasanti is verb, in there, plural, sorry. Rukesu is masculine, locative. Makata, masculine, nominative. Charanti is verb, plural.
Okay, so just read one more time for us the English translation all straight through.
Sure. Deer live in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
Monkeys move on the trees.
Right, or in the trees. That's fine. Very good. Thank you. And we have Vera. I hope you can unmute. And then would you be kind enough to do number 4 for us?
Okay. Manusa nayanehi pasanti.
Mm-hmm.
Manusa is a masculine nominative plural. Nayanehi instrumental plural. Pasanti verb, the third person plural. The meaning is men or people. People see with eyes.
Yes, right. This is a sort of odd word. Very good. You're absolutely right. This is sort of an odd word for the word for eyes. It's a much more common word, but it doesn't fall in our group, chakku. But yes, that's correct. And now we can try maybe sin we, if you can unmute. And can you do for us number 6, please?
Rukamha panani patanti. So Rukamha is ablative singular. Panani is neutral plural. Patanti is a plural verb. So its leaves fall from a tree.
Now, is panani singular or plural?
Plural, so leaves.
Right, leaves fall from a tree. Right. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
And let's try Ken, but we'll skip a little bit in terms of where we're located. Could you if you're there, Ken, if you can unmute, can you then do for us number 10? Which is a little ambiguous, I have to say, but we'll give it a try.
Matulo Putasa Bandani Dadati.
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 Yes.
The uncle gives goods to the son.
Mm-hmm. Good. Now, I have to say there seems to be a little bit of ambiguity in the sentence, that it could be, the putasa could be dative to the son, or it could be genitive, the son's goods. It's not clear to me, but it's probably as the gentleman just said, but that seems to be a little bit ambiguous to my mind. But I think he got it right. And now we can try Golfin.
Yes.
With number 12.
Number 12. Daraka mitehi sading kasing kilanti.
Yes.
The children plays water with friends.
Yes. Children play in the water with friends. So udakasming, udaka is water. It's the kind of word for water which is just like general water, not drinking water. Udaka, udakasming, in the water. And then we have our, as you correctly said, our instrumental of accompaniment with friends. Mitehi sading. Very good, thank you. And then let's try Sachini.
Hello?
Yes, I hear you. Thank you for joining. Can you try for us? Let's try 16.
Siho vanasming rukamule nisidati.
Mm-hmm.
The lion sits at the foot of the tree in the forest.
Exactly right. Thank you. Perfect. So notice in this sentence, there's a compound. A compound is a collection of more than one word stuck together. It's of ruka and mula. And the word mula means a root, but we don't in English translate it as a root of a tree. That sounds a little weird. And so as it was just said correctly, at the foot, and we get this as a help, at the foot of a tree. And so we get this sort of double locative. Okay, let's see if we can do a few more. Johan.
Yep.
Yeah, can you do for us 18?
18. Amatko dutena satim ratena aranyam pavisati.
Okay, just one thing is, the first word is amacho.
Sorry, amacho dutena. Okay. Amacho is a minister. So the minister, pavisati, he sees the forest. He sees the forest.
What does the verb pavisati mean?
Oh, sorry, enters. He enters the forest by chariot with his messenger, I think.
That's right. Exactly. So the minister enters the forest by chariot or cart with a messenger. Dutena sudding, instrumental of accompaniment. Very good, thank you. And we'll try maybe one more. Jim. We can try 20?
Sure. Vanija Bandani Nagaramha Gaman Aharanti. So merchants bring Bandani goods from the city to the village.
Yes, good. And good job keeping your dative and genitives straight, or dative and ablatives rather. Very good. And I think we have one or a couple more hands suddenly. Pat, if you can unmute. And then if you can do 22.
Okay. Asinjanti is a word I don't recognize. So,
It's a verb that means to sprinkle. It's rather
okay.
obscure.
Oh, right. That's right. Because there's also there's another form of that. Okay. So Wanija is merchants. Bandani, Nagarangha. Oh, sorry. Wrong one.
22.
Yeah. Upasaka is the lay
Well, first
follower.
just read it if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Upasaka udakena upani asinjanti. So the lay followers sprinkle the flowers with water.
Exactly. Right. Very good. Thank you. And Jane, if you would be so kind to do for us 24.
Yeah, Nama Budaya. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, actually, I would like to ask a question on number 7.
Okay, can you do 24 first?
Okay, sure. 24.
And I would like to ask you a question too. You've said Namo Buddhaya. What case is Buddhaya?
Buddhaya. Buddhaya is Ayah.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
Ayah. Ayah should be Namo Buddhaya.
Mm-hmm.
Ayah.
What case is that? I know you know the answer. I don't mean to put you on the spot too terribly.
Ayah is a dative.
Exactly. Homage to the Buddha. It's dative. Very good.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Very good.
It's okay.
Okay.
I need to think. Okay, number 20.
4, please.
Sorry, again.
24.
Okay, sure. 24. Luda kasa, puto, migasa, kayang, hatena, putsati.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The son of the hunter touched the deer body with his hand.
Yes, right. So here we have Ludakasa Puto. We have the hunter's son, Pusati, touches Hatena, that's instrumental, with a hand. Kayang, that would be the direct object, the body of the deer, genitive, just as you've said. Good. But you had a question about 7, right?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me the question, please.
Yeah. Because I see here the Kirang and Nagarang. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one is the locative.
Yeah. It's a confusing sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Vanija Gamamha Kirang Nagarang Haranti. So I've translated as merchants take milk to the city from the village. So Gamamha is ablative, from the village. And so I'm taking this sentence with what might be called a double accusative. The haranti is applying both up to the milk and to the city. So again, I would translate as merchants take milk to the city from the village. Yes?
Yeah, okay. So the Nagarang is to the city.
Yes, because it's a verb of motion.
Okay.
As we've said, verbs of motion often take the accusative as their object of destination, to the city. I understand that it sounds like it might be a dative, but with these verbs of moving, they take the accusative.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay.
Okay. So, Diane, are there any specific questions about this chapter from the YouTube? If you're there, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh.
Diane, I hear you now, I think.
Am I still muted?
No, I hear you fine. Any questions about lesson 8?
No, there was a question about 7, but you've already answered it.
Wow, we're ahead of the game. I'm so glad to hear it. Okay, well, then we'll pause there. And I thought just to give you a quick sort of breather, I can do for you a quick, what we say in the music business, an entr'acte, which is sort of like a moment where you can relax and I'll just do something for you and you don't have to struggle too hard to think about it. But I wanted to, because there was a question about two verbs in our last session, oruhati and authority. And I thought about it a little bit because I said, yes, of course, they mean the same thing. But when I looked at this website, which I mentioned to you, but I want to stress it again, which is the tipitaka.org website. That is, tipitaka.org is where we find the entire Pali Canon in Pali. And it has this amazingly powerful search function where you can put a word in, or even a group of words, or even a part of a word, and it will find out where this is located in the canon. It's sort of like dazzlingly amazing. And so when I put oruhati in, and I submitted 0 results, and I realized that in the dictionary, this word is actually spelled orohati, but it's still pretty obscure. Only 3 in the whole Sutta Pitaka, and 2 in the Vinaya. So not a very common word. So don't worry about that word. It's not very important to know, it would seem. And I think the other one was authority, which is a more important word, although kind of obscure. And I realized that I knew this verb, and I realized why, because it's used in a very striking and unusually idiomatic way, and I thought I could just show you a little bit about it. So if you can see my screen, I'm looking here at a discourse in the Anguttara Nikaya, which is called The 4 Great References. It's a rather famous discourse, I would say, in the Anguttara Book of Fours, because it talks about how one should trust information. It's called the Mahapadesa Sutta. The word padesa means, in a literal sense, more like a place or a location. But in this sense, it means where one looks for information. And these are the 4 great. And I'm not even going to tell you what the 4 are, because I want you to read the sutta in English. And I also should mention this most excellent website in case you don't know it. This is another thing I'm telling you about here, which is important, which is a website called suttacentral.net. And suttacentral.net is another repository of the Pali Canon, and it includes, in very large part, translations by an excellent translator named Bhikkhu Sujato, or Bhante Sujato, and he's in Australia, and he has put in enormous amounts of effort into this website, and it's fabulous. And one of the great features of this website is that you could have, as I do here on my screen, sort of side-by-side Pali and English. So this is Bhante Sujato's translation, and they use the Sixth Council, the tipitaka.org website text on the right. And so it's a great reference, or a great place to look if you're a student, because you can see what it means. So I just wanted to show you here. And of course, I don't worry about like, oh my God, what is he talking about? I have no idea. I'm just trying to give you little snippets. And so we have this sentence here in Pali, and I pointed out because it has a nice use of the vocative, idapana bhikkhave, bhikkhu evang vadeya. So here, O monks, so bhikkhave is perhaps the most common of all vocatives. O monks, monks. A monk, bhikkhu, would say thus. And we notice here that Venerable Sujato has chosen to render bhikkhu as mendicant, not monk or bhikkhu. And notice that he doesn't even translate the vocative at all. He leaves it out because it's so common. It's like, for instance, just right above it, iti hetang bhikkhave. It's not translated. And so maybe I'll mention that this class, of course, has no time to get into translation strategy, but there are various schools of how things should be translated. And I would say that Venerable Sujato chooses a more kind of loose translation strategy versus others that would translate much more literally word by word. And so here we have this sentence which is interesting. Tassa bhikkhave bhikkhuno basitang neva abhinanditabang na patikositabang. So here, O monks, again, not translated, but it's there in the Pali. A statement. Now we've had the word basati, to speak. This is sort of the noun form, a statement of the statement of that monk. This is a type of genitive. Should not be, this is a type of participle we won't be getting to, should not be delighted in, or and he has approved of, nor should it be dismissed. But here, and why I sort of brought this all up, well, first of all, we have here what we're just about to get to, hopefully in this class, is a form of the verb called the absolutive, which often ends in the tva suffix, which maybe you even recognize already. So here we have this long absolutive, 2 in a row. Unabhinanditva, apatikositva. So not having delighted in, and not having dismissed. But notice that Venerable Sujato just basically says, instead. So he's not translating literally. This is in no way a criticism. This is a type of translation. But once one becomes a sort of Pali student, one gets a little more picky and wants to see these words represented because we've spent so much time trying to figure out what they mean. Here's another one, ugat hetva, having learned. Or here he has having memorized. Carefully memorize is literally having retained well. And here is the verb authority in a form. And we said that the verb authority means to descend into. And so here it's represented as it should be descended into the suttas or texts. This is a locative. And so we have here a rather striking use of the word to descend, which means to look into, but with our eyes. But of course, we have to remember that at the time of the Buddha, there were no texts in that sense. So this is a very kind of metaphorical use of looking into texts. And I have to say, as a person who has been entirely raised with books, it's almost hard for me to understand how one analyzes suttas when they're only known from memory, that they're only recited. So that's just sort of an interesting aside, I thought, that you might be interested in. Don't worry too much about it. And now, in our remaining few minutes, I'd like to talk about what's known in Pali as, well, it's known as 3 things. The gerund, the absolutive, or the indeclinable participle. And as I said in our last session, I greatly and strongly prefer and will impress on you the importance of using the term absolutive. And so the question might have arisen in your mind, well, what is a participle in the first place? And speaking quickly, a participle is generally a form of a verb which is used as, typically in English, as an adjective. But in Pali it could be used, particularly in passive constructions, as a noun. But in this case, it has a very special meaning, and it's called indeclinable in the sense that once it's formed, it doesn't move into different cases. Because another important thing to know about participles is that when a verb becomes a participle, so to speak, it is then declined. It is not conjugated. And so that's a crucial thing to know. But the absolutive is easy because there's really only 1, sometimes 2 possible forms of it. And here, in our book, she gives somewhat technical explanation of how it's formed. I don't know if we have to worry too much about it, but maybe I'll say a little bit about it. So it can be formed in two ways. One is the more common tva suffix, and another way is using a suffix ya, y-a. And as she says, and I hope you've read already, that the absolutive is formed either from the root of the verb or sometimes the sort of present stem or verbal base. And I'll tell you what that means quickly. Don't worry too much about it. It's in many absolutives can be recognized off the bat if one knows the verb. So if one knows the verb pachati, to cook, one can easily discern pachitva would be the absolutive form from that tva, having cooked. And so as I said, and I'll repeat now, what an absolutive is, or how it works. So here, an absolutive is a form of the verb, which is now a participle, which represents an action in a sentence or a clause, which immediately precedes, comes before, the main verb of the sentence, the finite verb. Sometimes it can be even at the same time, but often it's right before. And so that's why we use in English this helping word, having cooked. So having cooked dinner and having washed the dishes, Stephen passed out. So here, having cooked and having cleaned in Pali would be represented using this thing called the absolutive. And so we have kaditva. Now here's where it gets a little less obvious. So the verb we've been having, to go, is gachati. Sure, gachati, to go. But the root of that verb is not entirely obvious on first glance, because the root is actually gum, which is here on the left, and that's why she has it. So the root of gachati is gum. And so very often the absolutive is formed off of the root. And so even though we know gachati as a verb, we might not immediately recognize gantva as having gone. And that's why it looks different. So it's not something like gachitva. It goes to the root, and we sort of have to remember that gantva has the meaning of having gone. And there's more technical things called assimilation, metathesis, which I won't even tell you about right now because I don't want you to sort of get nervous. I'll tell you a little bit here. The verb pajahati, which I've mentioned is a very important word, means to abandon, to give up, is most often represented with this form called pahaya. And so this would be the ya way of making an absolutive. And here's something very interesting. We've had now a lot the verb pasati, which is to see. But this is actually a very special Pali form of the Sanskrit root, which is drish, which you can see she's written for us here. So the root drish in Sanskrit has the sense of to see, and it comes into Pali quite a bit, like knowing and seeing. We talk about quite a bit in Buddhism, jnana dasana. So dasana is based on this root, drish. It's also in many other things, but the present form is pasati. As I said, it's sort of a special thing in Pali. So we very rarely see an absolutive pasitva, maybe in later Pali poetry, but much, much more important to know is disva. And that might be hard to recognize if you're used to thinking of pasati as the verb to see, because this comes from a root which is not entirely obvious from the form of the present. So disva, you might just have to remember, is having seen. Okay? So that is a quick pass, or sort of second quick pass through the absolutive. And maybe now I'll see if there are any sort of general questions about this or other things that I've spoken about. And before I take the questions, maybe I'll mention what we will be working on in next week, in our next couple of classes. So please do, if you haven't, lesson 9 for Monday, or for perhaps if you're in a different part of the world, that would be Tuesday morning. And then we will take what's called the infinitive, which is another indeclinable form, non-finite, but it is the verb, which is very simple to understand because it's formed with the suffix tung. Yes? So pachitung, to cook. And as I said early on in this class, when we think about verbs in English, we often are refer to them in the infinitive. That's how we would find them in the dictionary. To cook, to eat. That's how I often define words in Pali. What is gachati? I say it's to go. But as you know, in a more technical way, the verb in the dictionary entry, the sort of standard form, is the third person present singular, gachati. It's not gantung. But we need to do the infinitive too. And so we're going to look at that next on Monday. So the primary things for you to work on is lessons 9 and 10. And of course, everything preceding that. And we're going to sort of start passing through Pali Primer a little bit. I don't want to go too far within the Pali Primer book, perhaps 2 or 3 more lessons, because I do want to transition into our next book, which is the Ger and Karuna Tilaka text, which is almost entirely comprised of Pali Canon texts. A couple of them are sort of late Pali Canon, not really Pali Canon, but much of it that we'll be looking at is what's called Buddha Vachana, the words of the Buddha. And I know that's why you're here. You're not here to only talk about deers and pits in fields. And so I'm very excited to be moving on to that book, but we do need a little bit of groundwork first. So I'll take a couple of quick questions at the end of our time here. Pat, if you can unmute, are you there?
Yeah. So just a real quick question about the genitive and word order. I find myself, obviously there's the confusion between the dative and the genitive, if I recall correctly. They're not the same form, it's a sa. So in the cases when it is a genitive, can it go either way? Can it describe the preceding word or the following word? Or is it generally the case that it tends to go to the right? Because there are a couple of these sentences like Matulo Putasa Bandani, like, is that the uncle's son or is it the son's goods?
Yes, I understand. And as I said, these are sort of hypothetical sentences that we shouldn't stress too much about, but I do appreciate your concern of wanting to know how one takes it. Generally, typically, it's like it is in English, where the genitive will precede the word it's talking about. Stephen's answer, genitive, nominative. That's typical, but we'll see more of it. And the more, I would say, overall, the more you look at Pali, the less sort of dazzling it becomes, and things will start to click into place. It just takes time. But thank you for your question. Okay. And I have a person whose name, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce. Leek Tin Olier?
Yeah, hi, Stephen. I'm sorry. It has my first name and last name all together.
Okay.
I have a question about pronunciation. Earlier, the word pachati. I think you said pachati. So how would you know, since there is no diacritical mark, where to put the emphasis on, which syllable to put the emphasis on?
Yeah. Well, as you might have noticed, I haven't spent too much time talking about technical rules, but I've said that generally the strong or the long vowels that have those long marks that's where the stress will go. But as your example says, there is not. And so I would just tend to put the syllables evenly, pachati, and not really stress one or the other. That would be sort of a quick answer. It's definitely not Pachati. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll take Sachini.
Hello. Sorry if this is a bit of a stupid question, but in the start of the Pali primer, they have a part about the pronunciation.
Yes.
And in that, they have said that the simple T is pronounced like th in thumb. And earlier you said that it should be like in Thailand T. But
You mean the aspirated T with the H following it, right?
no, just the simple T.
The simple
Right.
T. T. Yes. What I think what I gave as an example is of Thailand was an aspirated T with a TH.
Oh, okay. So
I didn't
the
mean to
simple,
say the simple. Does that answer your question? Maybe there was a confusion.
oh, okay. Okay.
It's not a retroflexed, which would have the dot below. T, that sound. No, that's when the dot is there. There's also an aspirated retroflexed. But Thailand, I'm talking about how it is pronounced in America, I guess, and it is Thailand. And I was just trying to say that the H is not an independent letter, so it's not like Thailand, something like that. Okay?
So in the just the simple T is pronounced like T or T.
I'm not sure if I hear the difference from you.
Okay.
I apologize for my lack of ability. It's a dental T, T. So the tongue should go behind the front teeth. T.
Okay, because at the start of the Pali primer, it says it the other way, I think. Yeah.
I'm not sure. There's only two T's as far as I understand, which is the sort of simple T, T. And then there's the T with the dot below, which would be with the tongue moves backwards. And that's called retroflex, T. That's the only two I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, fun final question because we're quite over time. Kit?
Hi, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for the lessons. We are from Singapore. We currently taking some Pali examination, and this is like a refresher course for us.
Okay.
I noticed something interesting. I'm not sure if you'll be able to share. I saw that there's some sort of a guide sheet or a cheat sheet that you had on earlier on. I'm not sure if you can.
I will try to, thank you for reminding me. I will try to place that file on the monastery's website where you can find other materials or all the materials. And there I will make a guide to week 3, file 2, in case you've forgotten what to do. And so always refer to our monastery's website, baus.org, and I will definitely place that file, that sort of cheat sheet, as you say, there as well, okay?
Sure, thank you very much.
Okay, I think we are out of time, and I'm afraid we have to end. And I thank you all for your patience, and if I didn't get to your question today, I hope to get to it next time. Or maybe it will just you'll come to the answer. So thank you all very much. And I hope that you all can return next week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Have a great week. Study hard and please come back.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
Thank you, Stephen.